The reason that we're kind of gathered here today is just to recognize one of the northern New Hampshire best kept secrets. I think it is anyway. It's very related to the North Country. It's a sled dog team that maybe some of you folks have heard about by now, especially if you read today's Courier, you'll see it. But Mitch Ingerson and his team, which includes himself as a musher, and it includes Matt Carston, who is a kind of a full-time musher. He just finished a big race, sometimes nicknamed as the Iditarod East, as I understand it. It's probably one of the most grueling courses, from what I understand, 250 miles, and finished very well. He'll share with us how he finished. Now, Matt's father is Tom. I don't even know where Tom is right now. He's out. Oh, look at that. Tom is hiding on us, but we'll hear from him. And behind Bob is Beth, Matt's mother. And then we've got some people here from the office that we've been very interested in the team and the success of the team. And Sally, who's behind Bob, we'll hear from her also, is helping them do some promotion. Our aim is to honor the team, honor their effort, the sportsmanship, and we'll hear a little bit more about what the reason is that Century 21 is interested in their effort. Why don't we just gather around? We'll let Matt and Mitch and Zach.
I think we get started just because we all wanted to try and do it. It looked adventurous, fun, be outside. We all like dogs. If you do this sport, you'll eventually learn to love your dog more than you know. Especially if you're 80 miles from home and it's 1 in the morning and snowing, and it's you and him that's got to get home. He becomes very important to you.
Yeah, I think some people do have a question about how do the dogs respond to what you guys do. I mean, it's grueling for the musher, but how is it with the dogs? That's, I think, the question.
My opinion is that these dogs are just doing what they love to do. We don't have to ask them to do this. They want to do this. You can't, some people are under the opinion that you can force this issue, and you can't. I mean, they do this because they want to, and if they don't want to, they will just stop. And there's nothing you can do or say or dance around or anything to that effect that'll change their mind. But if you've ever been associated with a real dog team and one that's trained well, the training just means that they're in good shape. It's not that, you know, it changes their attitude. It just, they're in great shape. Dogs are a much better athlete than a human ever thought of being. And it gets tiring as a musher because you're just trying to keep up. And that's really what it is, in my opinion.
Do you run the same dogs every day? Or do you take different teams? How many dogs are on the team that looks like?
Well, it varies from race to race, and it varies from distance to distance. Say you're doing a 30-mile race, you might take 6 dogs for that. Doing a 60-mile race, it might be 8 dogs. And most of the races that we do now, they're 12-dog races. And it's the same dogs every day throughout the race. Yeah, you can't you can't take a fresh dog and put them in your team.
And when you go to feed them, do you change the food that what you would give to them if they were just hanging out in the backyard every day? If you're running them, do you double their food or change the type of food that you give them?
Once training starts, they eat a lot more, and during a race, they definitely eat a lot more because they're not typically running, you know, 150 miles in a 24-hour period. So they're eating a lot more. But as far as what we feed them, that doesn't change because you don't want to introduce something new to their diet in a situation where they're under some stress to some degree.
Do you feed them bagged dog food or do you feed them raw?
We feed the dogs raw beef, rice, beef fat, and regular dog food kibble. It's a high protein, high fat kibble. So, and also multivitamin and mineral supplements, and chondroitin and glucosamine. So they have their diet is for them it's far superior than to the foods that I eat every day. You know,
Right.
you know they're on a wonderful diet. You
I know that my dogs, I fed them raw chicken up until they were like a year or so old, and
Yeah.
made their coat and their bones
Sure.
really,
Raw chicken's really good for a dog. I mean,
yeah.
it's good. We feed that some too, and I did in a race. I feed it to them mostly because of the fat content of it, because the skins are ground right in with it. But it also gives the dog something else to look forward to besides beef all the time, you know. And so we feed a little bit of chicken during the course of the training season too, here and there, so that so their system is accustomed to eating that.
Yeah, I just wondered how.
Yeah, they just consume an amazing amount of calories during a race. I mean, you wouldn't believe the amount of food that 12 dogs can eat. I mean, they really
Yeah,
pack it away.
I think one of the unique things about you guys is the way you treat your dogs, the priority they have. And you received the Best Kept Team Award. Can you talk about that a little bit? And what makes you unique and how you're handling your dogs?
Well, going into the race season, one of my goals is probably different than, say, the Mitch's goal for the season, because he was training some young dogs. We call them puppies, and we'll call them puppies until they're 2 years old. But I had a more mature team. The average age of the dog in my team was 4.5 years old. I had two 2.5-year-olds in there and one 6.5-year-old. So for the bulk of the team was mature. So as I approached training season this year, the dog team has a lot of residual miles on them from the previous 4 years of training. So I knew they could run a long distance, you know, say I knew they could go 100 miles nonstop if I need be, and I knew that they could run for, you know, 12 hours if need be. So I didn't feel a lot of pressure as to doing long training runs this year and trying to pile the miles on the dogs. The main goal was to keep them healthy, number one, and if they're in good health, and that leads to them being happy. So those were the main goals this season: keep them healthy, happy, keep their attitudes good, and you know, I didn't want them to get to a point where they felt burned out in any ways. So those are the main goals this season, and you know, we went into the bear grease, you know, with those being the goals, and trying to keep as many dogs in the team as I could. And it turned out we, you know, only had to drop 2 dogs during that race, and the vets were really impressed with the work the handlers did at the checkpoints, and so we were honored in receiving the Best Kept Team Award this year. And that was really thrilling.
Could you talk to us a little bit about, you mentioned the bear grease, the types of races that you guys have been doing, and then how it was this year, and what that, you know, what the difference is.
Yeah.
The bear grease races in Minnesota, right?
Yes, sir.
So maybe give us a little bit of information about that, right?
You want to tell them?
All right. Typically, we've done 60-mile races, 100-mile races, and then the Can-Am 250, which we've done probably for the last 4 years. You know, been 60s, 100s, Can-Am 250, and this year we kind of had a new plan with more aggressive kind of a race schedule, and it was very time-consuming. We went out to Minnesota to the end of January for a race. And we like to get there a few days ahead of time so the dogs get some rest from the road. You know, we don't want them to be road weary and then get to the finish line and start. And the bear grease is a 400-mile race, or pretty close to 400 miles. So that was a great way to start the season, I thought. You know, for my team, they've been there before. You know, they know how to run a long race like this. And then we get home from that. We're home for maybe a week and a half, and then we leave again for Marquette, Michigan. Another 30-plus hour drive for us, it turned out to be. And so we get out there, we do that race, come home. We're home for another week and a half. and it's off to northern Maine for a 250-mile race. So it's a pretty hectic schedule because you need about a week just to pack all your gear for these races, and then load it up, and then you're gone again. So in that aspect, our race season was a lot different for us because we're traveling much further, and we had 2 teams and wherever we went. So that was more of a challenge, for us, because once again there's so much gear that you have to pack, and just finding the room for it all. Even though we have a 24-foot enclosed trailer, we still were crammed with all of our gear. So that aspect the race season was a lot different, and so my team did basically 900 miles of racing this year in just 3 races, and throughout that 900 miles of racing, I only had to leave 4 dogs at various checkpoints throughout these races, which was I was very happy with. Some guys just in the Can-Am might have dropped 5-6 dogs just in that one race.
So when you drop the dog, do you have a replacement, or you just have a smaller team?
No replacement. You just have a smaller dog team. Yeah.
Mitch, how long does it take for a team to recover from a 250-mile race before they're ready to go to another one?
Well, I think that varies. It depends on how good a care you took of your team during that race. We focused this year much harder on our dog care. We're preparing to go to the Iditarod in 2010. Not that we have never not done what I feel is a pretty good job, but we really focused on it this year because we went from race, you do a 1,500-mile drive, then a 400-mile race, and a 1,500-mile drive, then a 250-mile race. It's like you and your dog team never stop moving. True recovery. Most of the time when we finished a race, our team could still race because that's how we took care of them. We could have raced, given them 6 hours off and kept racing. We didn't. We've changed our style a little bit, and it's really starting to show, and that's why Matt got the best kept team. When we finish a race, any race, the Marquette race, the Can-Am race, we get a lot of honors from the vets. The vets brought other teams over to look at our team so they could figure out what a team's supposed to look like. I feel that any of the 3 races this year, we could have just kept racing, and that's what we want to do. If you're going to compete in the Iditarod, you got 1,150 miles. It'll make these 200-mile races seem like, an afternoon at the grocery store. So.
Let me ask another question.
Yes, ma'am.
What difference does it make if it's a male or a female dog that you're running? Is there a difference?
Not a huge difference. Males are typically a little bigger, a little stronger. Females oftentimes are lighter build and faster. A lot of times you'll run females in the front of your team to try and create speed. Matt's had great success with that. And sometimes females are not only faster, but they're smarter.
Oh.
Thank you so much.
They're more interested in
That's
being
true in all
at any level.
species.
They're more interested in being in control.
Because we're smarter.
Yeah,
We know
right.
the best way to go, is that
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
No, I just wondered how you ran them, if you were better off with males than females. But I know that my females are a lot faster than my males. My dogs that I have at home, when they start chasing each other, the females seem to get a longer stretch going, and they're out there.
Some mushers might prefer a non-male team over a mixed male-female team, and some might prefer to have more females in there. What I look for is just the dog that's a super athlete. It doesn't make a difference to me whether they're male or female. I'm looking for the most durable, fast dog is what I'm looking for. One that's going to go for mile after mile after mile.
And your injuries are what? They hip fractures mostly?
No. Sometimes you do have. They might get slightly injured in the hips. Most of the injuries that you'll see in a dog sled race are a shoulder might go lame, or a wrist might get sore from just the miles of pounding.
Right.
And generally a lighter dog, say a 55-pound dog, is going to do better than say a 75-pound dog over that much mileage, just because they're not carrying that much weight.
Does their vision affect anything? Do you have them checked?
Their vision? No, it
Their
doesn't.
sight?
No, it doesn't seem to. You know, I've read stories about guys that had blind dogs in their team. The dogs, you know, they see the trail a lot different than we do because they're down here and
Right.
we're up here, so they see things that we don't see in the trail. So sometimes you're wondering, why did that dog go left of this snowdrift instead of right? You know, it looked like it was a lot better over there, but he's seeing things, or she's seeing things a little bit differently than we do. And also they see a lot better at night, actually. I think they see better at night sometimes than they do during the day, you know, because in the daytime they get a lot of glare off the snow, but at nighttime they really have a keen sense of vision. And sometimes, even during a race, if I'm in a place that I'm not that familiar with, I'll turn my headlamp off and just trust the dogs, knowing that they're going to stay on the correct trail.
Speaking of
Lot of
that,
trust.
speaking of that, Nat, there's a light side usually to everything. And this is probably a rumor, probably is. But what we heard was that you had to learn how to deal with sleep deprivation, preparing for the Minnesota run.
Yeah.
And so you were out at night doing your thing. So is there any truth to that thing about the dogs took advantage of that little?
Well, they took advantage of the fact that I wasn't there anymore and the sled was a lot lighter. So, no, I just decided, you know, to go out on a night training run one night and up in Pittsburgh earlier in the year. So I go up to Coleman State Park, actually, just by Colebrook there, and I pulled a snow hook a little after midnight. You know, like 10 minutes after midnight, I left Coleman State Park, and it just started to snow a little bit. And I get about 10 miles out, and I stopped to look at the trail signs, and because it's snowing out, I couldn't see the trail markers all that good, so I'd have to get off and, you know, go look at the trail markers real close and kind of walk away from my sled. And I had done this maybe 5 times already because there are a lot of intersections there that I had to go through to go up to Pittsburgh and to go exactly where I wanted to go. And even though I had been there before, you know, I still was questioning whether I was going in the right direction. So I was having to turn the dogs completely around in 180 several times, and then on this last time that I did, they were getting used to me doing that, so they started coming around by themselves. So I just stood out of the way. Okay guys, come on. And they just kept going and just left me, and I'm, you know, come back, whoa, stop, Nugget, bear, you know. And they just keep on going right out of sight, and I didn't see them again for another three hours or so, but it was like over 16 miles they went on their own. And the trails that they went on by themselves were quite unbelievable because they're downhill, uphill, curvy, you know, and they didn't wrap the sled around a tree or anything like that. And when I finally caught up with them, they were on Route 3 heading south, like they were heading home. And they're all lined out, just running down the road. So, yeah, they proved to me that they didn't need me to say a thing to them. They did
Like the idea of having the sled in.
Yeah, I think they did.
No extra weight.
I think they did.
It was that female in the lead.
That's
taking
right,
charge.
probably. I think it was. Nugget was leading. I'm sure it was. I'm positive it was her making all the decisions up there. But, you know, being that late at night, you know, I didn't really expect anybody to be out there on the trail. You know, no snow machines or anything. So I thought that was the safest time to go, really, for me to go up there. And then after I lost my dog team, I said, well, this isn't good because there's not going to be anybody out here to help me now. Yeah. So I just said, well, I'll just keep walking till daylight, you know, and or however long it takes to catch up with the team. And fortunately, there was a guy out there grooming, and you know, I caught up with him maybe a little 1 o'clock after night, you know, 1 o'clock in the morning or so, and he radioed a friend of his in town, I think a guy that was on the fire department. He came out with his snow machine and said, you know, I picked up the track. They went across First Connecticut Lake, but we usually don't take snow machines across the lake this early in the season, so I really don't want to go out there. But we went down there with the spotlight, and we looked across the lake, and we could see where, you know, 3 or 4 other sleds had just hammered across the lake. So we said, well, we'll give it a try. And so I hopped on this little snow machine with this guy. He was a pretty big guy. So I'm kind of hugging on to him there. And did about 80 across that lake, just as fast as he could go, pretty much, you know. He didn't want to go through the ice, and nor did I. But, you know, the groomer had told him, as long as you're going more than 40, you know, you'll just skip across the water if there's any, whatever. So I just hung on. We went as fast as we could go, and eventually caught up with them. But they went, you know, they had the opportunity to go on the highway several times earlier, and they didn't. But they went through a covered bridge and went by all these houses and down driveways that connected back onto the trail and all this stuff, all by themselves. So, you know, I learned something about my dog team that night. So, and I learned a lesson that I already, you know, had been taught before. It was reiterated, I guess you could say, that night. I learned some more.
Heather yourself too, Lauren?
Yeah, yeah.
This is another one of Matt's well-kept secrets from his mother, probably his father too. Maybe from now on he'll use the beacon, instead of putting it in the sled, maybe he'll put it in his jacket.
Right. Well, we got through to Mitch later that night, and he came and rescued me up off the side of the highway there, so it was good.
The reason that we got interested in you guys was your dad, Tom, and mother. We got acquainted with them and found out the reason they actually came east from Minnesota. And your interest in dogs, the interest has developed. I'm going to say that probably the reason is that not that you've won the plaques, which you've done well with so much, as it is your the humanity side, the humane side, the care of your dogs. Mm-hmm. Because we've heard stories about actually you're placing very well, but you have a dog that needs attention, so go back to the stop and make sure the dog's okay before you continue. Sure. And sure. Sacrifice the position in the race. Right. Do you have any comments, you know, from your point of view, of how that attachment between the musher or the team and the dogs, how that develops and what's behind all that?
Because you're out there working with the dogs every day, you know, you see them every day, and you're caring for them every day, you really build this strong bond. And you know, my opinion is when you discipline a dog, you know, whether it's sit, stay, you know, to go on by an object in the trail, or to go gee or go haw, all these little things that you teach your dog, in turn the dog shows you more respect. And then we develop a mutual respect. And you know, because I'm with these dogs so much every day, I learn to trust them. I learn to put all my trust in them, and they do the same for me. They really trust me. You just develop an incredibly strong bond. You know, you know, like I've told many people before, they become your best friends after some time. And people might say, "Well, don't you get, you know, worried being, you know, 50, 60, 80 miles away from any civilization out there in the middle of the woods at night all by yourself?" And you know, I'm not out there by myself. You know, I've got some of my best friends with me. You know, and they're better at surviving in the wilderness than any person that I could take out here with me. You know, but you know, you just develop a strong bond with them. And then I try to prepare the dogs. Say we did all these 3 big races this year, and the longest one being 400 miles. Try to prepare the dogs for what I'm going to ask them to do. You know, I don't go to a 400-mile race with an inadequate amount of mileage on the dogs, or say I'm going to be running across lakes and down rivers, and the trail up there is going to be really hard. So I prepare them for the things that we're going to face in that particular event. You know, I wouldn't feel right, you know, going to a race without properly preparing the dogs. Sure. You know, I just wouldn't do it. Yeah. You know, and then, you know, at the end of the race, that shows at the end of a race, you know, that you've prepared the dogs adequately. Yeah.
What's involved in that preparation? I know Mitch had, you already mentioned a couple of puppy teams. So the puppy teams that we're racing, this year, will they be prepared next year, or does it take 2 years, or how long does that take?
My opinion is it takes 3 years before they're really race hardened, you know, really seeing all the things that can happen. They'll be much better next year. This year was their first year to learn. I mean, they were 17 months old, and you really work at just keeping them happy and showing them everything that can go wrong, or you know, and expose them to everything that you can in a race, and the people, the crowds, the noises, the equipment, the ice, you know, road crossings. I mean, you never know what you're going to be facing, and most road crossings are covered with people hooling and hollering, and there's 2 cop cars, and the lights are going, and people are jumping around doing this, going whoa, 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 you know, and you really don't have to say anything. They'll just cross the road, you know, but you just expose them to that, and the more of that you can expose them to, the better you'll become at racing, and the better they will become at racing. And they really only have one focus, and that's running, and you just let them do it. But the more exposure we can give them, the better, to anything. We invite kids to come to our kennel. We go to schools. We try and teach some of the younger kids about the Iditarod. And we'll bring some, you know, members of our team to the school, and like you go to the gym and 40 or 50 kids, and we lock the doors and let the dogs loose. So it's only a couple, but little things like that will show up later. And we work around heavy equipment all the time, and so being exposed to that, it keeps dogs. Snowmobiles, you got to expose them a lot to snowmobiles, because we're always on some little snowmobile trail somewhere. But it takes a while, but it's by repetition mostly.
Yeah, a lot of training the dogs, and of any animal, I guess, is just repetition, doing things over and over again. And one of the things that we do with pups, or Mitch's wife does mostly, is as soon as they're pretty much old enough to walk, she starts taking them out on walks, you know, and through the woods, on trails through the woods, and then she'll do that several times a week. So they start to develop a rapport there. They start to develop their muscles, start to feel comfortable away from their kennel, away from home, walking through the woods. And so it all starts at a very young age. And then when they're 5, 6 months old, 7 months old, then we'll fit them with a harness and hook them to a four-wheeler or a sled for their first time. And they're absolutely nuts the first time. Some are pulling backwards, some are pulling to the side, some are pulling forward. You know, and as long as they're pulling, we look at that as a good sign, because eventually they'll learn that it's easier to go pull forward than it is backwards. And but it's amazing, you know, the first time, you know, 80–90% of the dogs, they'll just get it right away and just go right away, and they're pulling and running their little hearts out right away. And that's where it starts. And then the more often you train them, the better they're going to get at it, you know. So it's all about repetition. And sometimes people ask you, well, why are you so successful, or what makes you so successful at this? And it's just about spending the time with the dogs and spending the time on the trail training the dogs. And that's what it really all boils down to. But it all starts at an early age, you know, like Mitch said, exposing them to a variety of noises, objects, whether it's cars, tractors, or whatever. You know, it all starts as soon as they're born, pretty much.
Mitch, I rode a couple of years ago behind about 20 dogs, I think.
Yeah.
And how do you control 20 dogs out? You don't have any reins, you don't have any whips.
I don't know.
How do you control?
It's all voice, command, and faith. We never have any reins. We start with smaller teams, typically, but it's all voice commands once you get a few leaders develop, and we never stop working on the leaders, but it's all just jee-haw, and it is totally voice command. And one of the benefits of using a four-wheeler on bare ground, you can stop the team with it. You know, we use them to hold the team back. The teams have more power than most people realize, and you give the voice command, and if they do it properly, you praise them. And if they don't, you give it again, but you can create resistance, instant resistance with a wheeled vehicle. And that tells them that it wasn't correct. And typically, most of them are so smart, they'll just do the opposite, and then you praise them. And it's just through repetition, like Matt just said. Dogs are very bright, and if you work with them,
Which dogs are you communicating with? All of them or just the lead dogs?
well, I believe all of them can hear it, but we focus on the lead dogs, and it's like I personally, I'll say their name and then the command. So there's no confusion, but after a while, especially once you switch to a sled and you're out in the woods, I mean, you can almost whisper them. You don't have to wave your hands and holler, and you can just, you very comfortably, and the more comfortable you are, the more comfortable the team is, Typically, whatever you're feeling is what the team's feeling. The gang line's kind of like a connector between you and them, and you'll realize that after a while, after you spend enough time with them, and you really, you generate a great relationship with them, and that's the enjoyable part.
Do some of the dogs work better with other dogs than, like, with people? If you put together a team of
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
you connect. Does that happen
Right.
with the dogs as well? That
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Everybody has their buddies, especially with a younger team. Older, mature dogs, still important, but not as. But the younger ones, of course, that's what I've been doing for a few years, is young dogs, and I notice it more. They all get their best fowl that they like to run with.
have you already identified, or have the dogs identified themselves as who will be racing in the Iditarod in 2010, or is that still a process?
That'll always be a process. We got some,
Right up until the time we
Right till
go.
the very end.
yeah,
Yeah.
it never stops changing, and you just keep working it.
Could I ask, Zach, what do you do?
Not much, really. I just help around, and they got some really young ones I've been trying to start running a little bit, just because they don't have time for it.
You got something coming up, haven't you?
Yeah, this weekend, just a little 25-mile race, but. so it
This
should be
Zach's first
exciting.
race, we're trying to gear
Yeah.
him up for, he does this 25-mile race, and then he'll be qualified to do a 60-mile race. He does a 60-mile race and does well in it, and then he can run a 100-mile race. And once he gets this 100-mile race under his belt, then he can maybe, if he's still interested,
Right,
step up and do a 200 or 250-mile race.
that's when it gets tough, you
Is
get
that
over
a goal?
100. Yeah, I think so, I'd like to do it.
Yeah.
Just the endurance test, I think it'd be fun.
I think Zach will be really good at it. I mean, he's really good with the animals, and been a great help to us this season.
Well, we've been happy to support you guys and encourage you, and that's kind of what why we gathered this little meeting with you, to give you an opportunity for us to express to you some appreciation and encouragement, and we have some refreshments, and I noticed that you brought some things for display
Sure.
for us to take a look at.
Sure.
And your dad has I don't know if you know about this or not, has a news clip.
I'd like to see that.
That you haven't seen it?
No.
It's on video, so if you want to set that up? It's a video, none of you guys have seen this then?
See, Zach doesn't know it, but we're setting him up for a couple of years of severe abuse.
Bob, I wanted to say to you that these Nevahome mushers have really done a lot of reading and a lot of research, and have gone a long distance to get some well-bred dogs. I did run champions, and so their kennel is really probably, I would say, one of the best in the whole lower 48. They've got 71 dogs now, and from the minute that these dogs are born, they get the best of care, and they're aligned with a really wonderful veterinarian from Lancaster, Dr. Anderson. So they're extremely well cared for.